Right. Okay. All right. So, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you are all doing well. We are going to begin. So, in today's Parshas Lech Lecha, we have the quote that is attributed to the Rebbe Rashab. At least he's the first one who popularized it. But it could have come from one of his predecessors, which is said that the Parsha of Bereshis, the first Parsha, begins on a very happy note, right? The world is created, we are introduced to the Garden of Eden, etc., etc. But very quickly, the Parsha takes a little bit of a negative turn, paradise lost. By the end of the parsha, Hashem is regretting having ever created mankind, and he's decided to do something drastic about it. Right. So the parsha starts off positively, but ends off in negative territory. The next parsha, Parshas Noah, begins very dicey, with Hashem following through on his plan and wiping out all of humanity and all living things. But it ends on a positive note, because by the end of Parshat Noach, we are introduced to our real hero, Avram Avinu. Parshat Lech Lecha, this week's Parsha, is finally a Parsha where the whole week we get to live with in joy, because to this Parsha we get every single day as we go through the aliyot of the Parsha, each one of the sections of the Parsha. We get to live with Avram and Sarah the whole week. And so this is a joyous Parsha. And obviously a tremendous amount to learn in this week's Parsha. But I want to get to an interesting point in the Parsha. And I will going to give a disclaimer, a preceding disclaimer. This is not in any way social commentary on what is occurring right now. And I'll explain what I'll become self-evident what I mean shortly. Why I'm giving that I feel a need rather to give that disclaimer. In this week's parsha, Avram will arrive at the age of 99. His wife will be 90. And God is going to turn to Avram and will say to him, what?
Lech Lecha,
Nope, that he said 24 years earlier than that.
Oh.
No, but once he's 99, and he's already done much of what.
You're going to have a lot of kids.
Well, first he says you're going to have a child, right? Miraculous. Avram is 99, Sarah is 90. To which Avram turns to God and he says,
"No."
He says, "Not necessary.
Not necessary.
God, I have one.
What?
Yeah, not necessary. Not necessary, because I already have one." Avram says to God.
Oh, right.
He says, "Lu Yishmael yichya lefanecha." If only Yishmael could be the one who will live before you. So Avram, to a certain degree, says, "God, well, I appreciate it tremendously, but I already have Yishmael." And the truth of the matter is that Yishmael has quite a good, an amazing potential, and he's actually in many ways not only living in that moment his potential, but ends up living to his potential of righteousness, etc., etc. First of all, he's obviously the son of Avram, right? But also his mother is no slouch. She is an incredibly special woman. Keturah, right, or named Hagar, but she's then called Keturah because her actions are, as the Talmud tells us, cited by Rashi, are so pure that they are equivalent in caliber to the service of the ketoret, of the spices brought in the inner altar in the temple. There was the regular service offered in the outer altar, which is the animal offerings. But then there was offerings considered of a higher caliber. The offerings brought in the inner chamber, the kadosh, it's literally called the holy, and in it was the golden altar of the incense, and it was also a daily service, but it was done specifically by the Kohanim, oftentimes by the Kohen Gadol himself. And this offering of the incense is called kitoret, which is where the word keturah comes from. So she was an incredibly pure person in terms of her actions. Not only that, she was one of incredible self-sacrifice for ideals and standards for holiness and for God. She was the princess of the Egyptian royalty. She was royalty of the greatest empire of the time, of the age. And Avram and Sarah roll through, as we know, because there was a famine in the land of Canaan at that point, Avram and Sarai. And by the time they leave, she opts to leave with them, to go with them, because she realizes better to be a maidservant in the household of Avram and Sarah than to be a princess in Egypt. So this was a woman of incredible insight, incredible integrity, incredible self-sacrifice, etc. And so Avram turns and says, look, we know that Avram doesn't like to waste, right? Avram likes to see everything, in a sense, get its chance and hopefully realize its fullest potential, which is why when God tells Abraham that he's going to wipe out the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, Avram says no. And he really tries to see if there's any potential salvage here, right? If he can salvage this circumstance in this situation. And so here Avram is being true to form. He's saying, of course, he would love to have another son, to have a son with his beloved wife Sarai, etc., etc. But he is being true to himself and true to that principle. If I have a son, and he really is already born to very special parents, and he's going to be growing up in my household, etc., etc., why can't he not be the my successor and the next progenitor of the Jewish people? And so Avram Avinu asks it, Lu Yishmael Yichya Lefanach. Why, in fact, cannot Yishmael be the one who lives before you? And Hashem basically says, no, no, no. It's going to have to be somebody else. And his name is going to be Yitzchak. He already says, Ki bi Yitzchak yikarei l'chalazara. Yitzchak specifically will be the one who you will call your future kin. And Yishmael, gam hu yalam v'gam hu yigdal. He truly will be great, and he will have a nation. Now, interestingly enough, and as I said, I'm not. The point of this is not to make social commentary, but it says gam hu yalam v'gam hu yigdal, that he will make a great nation. He will make a nation, and he will be great. It doesn't say he will make a great nation. But it does say he himself will be great. And in fact, we do know that he does earn the moniker, the righteous Gentile, that he was, in fact, considered great and righteous. And one of his greatest acts of righteousness is that he did, in fact, allow Yitzchak, when it came to burying their mutual father, let's not forget that Avram was just as much his father as he was Yitzchak's father. But when it came to burial, he allowed Yitzchak to take the lead, showing a tremendous amount of humility and respect and acceptance of the circumstance, which is, again, an incredible sense of righteousness, something that we did not see one generation later with Esav, who never accepted that Yaakov was the one to receive the birthright. And they were a lot, and Yitzchak and Esav, Yaakov and Esav were a lot closer in age. They were literally seconds apart. While Yishmael was definitively the older brother, he had 13 years on Yitzchak, at least 13 and a half years. So the question is, why, in fact, was Yishmael not the one why was he turned down when Avram indicated that he would be okay with it? Why did Hashem insist that no, pass over Yishmael and it's gonna be Yitzchak?
Well, what I guess the question I would ask is a little different. Why didn't Hashem or even Abraham, anybody, say that Yishmael needed to be converted to Judaism? Because if he had been, maybe that would have been all right for him to be the progenitor.
So, but that's part of the point. We see that Hashem.
Can I suggest
Hashem,
maybe it was
well,
maybe it was because God wanted Sarah to be the mother?
1 minute. So first to answer Paula's point, the fact is then that should have been what Hashem said. Hashem said, yes, let Ishmael be and we'll convert him. Or at that point, conversion was just Hashem choosing, right? Because we know Ishmael did have a bris and he was the son of Avram. And his mother had committed. So at that point, it wasn't conversion that was missing. It was Hashem choosing. And we're going to get back to that point in a moment. But now to your point, Jerry, about it not being Sarai. Okay, true, but why? Why did it need to be Sarai? In other words, like this, just to make Sarai feel happier, right? Or to make a to a certain degree, the commitment by all our patriarchs and our matriarchs, right, to Yiddishkeit goes beyond their own personal feelings. Their devotion is higher than that. That would not be enough of a reason on its own for the what's it called for the next for the progenitor of the Jewish people to be for Yishmael to be passed over and Yitzchak to be the one. It has to be something intrinsic to them. And as we said, because truly Hagar slash Keturah was a great enough person, in theory, to be the one to raise somebody with a commitment to Yiddishkeit, right? So it needed to be something intrinsic. And because obviously we're saying, or else Avram Avinu is suggesting it, and Hashem dismisses it as an issue that is with the child themselves. Now again, Yishmael was righteous, so what was he missing? And the answer is that Yishmael was entirely too normal. Entirely too normal to be the progenitor of the Jewish people. That was his flaw. He was too normal. And I'm not even being facetious. I am being entirely accurate and entirely, truthful. I'm not exaggerating at all. But let me explain myself. Yishmael was born a natural and normal birth, while Yitzchak's birth was entirely miraculous. It was supernatural. That was one major difference between Yishmael and Yitzchak. Anybody else know another key major difference between Yishmael and Yitzchak? Yishmael had his bris at 13 years old. And Yitzchak had his bris at 8 days. Now, one could posit that having the bris at 13 is by far a greater and a more logical commitment to God if the bris is a covenant and a commitment, that having a bris is entering into a commitment with God, a commitment that is eternal, a commitment that is that cannot be erased, it cannot be washed away, is literally embedded on the skin, then it makes more sense that that bris should be entered into at the age of 13, at arriving at intellectual majority. Right? We don't let 2-year-olds sign on contracts. Right? And whenever we kind of have a contract or whatever it is, where it says, I, Yishmael, of sound mind and body, right? There, that's important, right? Do hereby commit to no longer be sound of body, and have a bris or whatever it is. But I'm saying, think about it. There, Ishmael here is showing a measure of commitment that a bris at 8 days old, to a certain degree, would be lacking. He is voluntarily entering into this, knowing what it is. Well, Yitzchak doesn't have a choice in the matter. Isn't that more laudable? Isn't that, in a sense, a greater sign of commitment? The answer is, of course it is. Rationally, you're right. But again, that's the whole problem here. It's entirely too normal, entirely too logical, entirely too rational to be what it is, what is necessary to be the progenitor and the next Jewish person, the progenitor of the Jewish people.
I'm not so comfortable with the first. I'm still back on the first reason.
Well, they're all tied together. So allow me to flesh it out.
Sure, absolutely, please.
There, Hashem is not establishing a line, a dynasty of righteousness, a dynasty of good people, of committed people, not even a dynasty of people devoted to God. You see, Judaism is the one religion where that as per its doctrine, you don't need to be a Jew to have a connection to God, right? To a certain degree, I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but I actually, at the end of the day, it carries a lot of truth. That if you're walking down the street and you pass by a Christian, and he just continues walking, or he politely says hello and then continues walking, you should turn around to the person and say, "What's your problem?" You should turn to that Christian guy and say, "What's your problem? You don't care about me?" And he'll turn around and say, "Sure, I care about you." And says, "If you care about me, why aren't you converting me? Why are you trying to convert me? If you truly cared about me and my eternal soul, in your doctrine, it says that unless I become a Christian, I'm going to burn in hell forever." So, in fact, the only Christians who really you should be saying thank you to are the ones who are knocking on your door and pestering you to convert, because clearly you care. All the rest that just are happy, it was like, according to their doctrine, it's like, oh, you're going to burn in hell. You're going to burn in hell. You're going to burn in hell. And they don't care. They don't care enough to at least try to save me. And by the way, the same is with Islam. Judaism, when somebody comes and says, "I want to convert," we turn around and say, "Why? Why? You don't need to convert. You can have a relationship with God without converting. You don't need to be a Jew to have a relationship with God." Yishmael had a relationship with God. Yishmael had a righteous and a devoted relationship with God. And God says, yes, but that doesn't make him a Jew. Because again, he is entirely too normal. To be a Jew is going to mean to be somebody who does not operate in the realms of normalcy. Mark Twain noticed this, right? Mark Twain says there is no rationale for the continued existence of the Jewish people. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, right? He says the Romans, the Babylonians, the Greeks, they each conquered the world, made a huge amount of noise, and they all did what every other nation does and every other natural species does, and faded out of existence. Because that is natural. Everything has attrition. Everything eventually fades and fades and fades and fades until it's gone. Everything. And you can actually catalyze that attrition by picking on them, right? By culling them, cutting, by helping actively erase them, right? So that usually speeds up the process. And there never has been a people that have been as persecuted and as attacked and as targeted, et cetera, as the Jewish people. Oh, they're still here. They're defying every law. They are defying the natural order. And he is entirely right. And he remains befuddled because he didn't learn Parshas Lech Lecha. Or he didn't learn it with this commentary, in which God says that's why it's got to be Yitzchak. Because Yishmael is entirely too natural. He's entirely too normal. He wasn't born in a miraculous way. The way his existence is not miraculous by definition. And so, sure, he's a great guy, but he's susceptible to nature. He's susceptible to nature. And also that aspect of the fact that he chose with his intellect to commit and connect to God, that is beautiful and laudable and righteous. But that again is entirely too rational and entirely too normal. I'm going to ask my people to be devoted to me beyond reason and beyond rationale, beyond logic. There is going to be times when logic will tell you, get out. Break this contract. Throughout history, there has been numerous times, thousands, millions of times, where nobody would be able to fault a Jewish person for saying, I'm done with the contract. Stop the ride, I'm getting off. And every single generation, we re-up by giving our own children the bris. And we don't give them a choice. We don't give our children a choice. We give them the bris at 8 days old. We don't wait till they're old enough to say, I want it. We just do it. We enter them into a lifelong commitment, as our parents did to us, as other parents did to us, to them, etc., etc. Why? Because that's what it means to be a Jew. That's Judaism right there. It's beyond our rationale, it's beyond our logic, and it's beyond the natural order of things. That's what it means to be a Jew. It's not tied to human nature. It's not tied to nature. It's the very idea that God says, I choose you to transcend nature.
It's very lonely.
It is. As I said, that's part of what makes it illogical. Because logic, after a certain while, demands stop. It's uncomfortable, it's lonely, it's difficult, you get targeted. Of course, that's the whole point, Paul.
For a baby, not a baby, for a young child.
Yeah, what are we committing the children to? It's really, again, when you give your child a bris, you are committing them to be part of the persecuted people. Why would you do that? And definitely, why are you celebrating that? Because it's not based on rationale or logic. It's based on a cognizance, an awareness that this is entering the child into who they are. You're the Jewish people. Finished. We are the Jewish people. It's who we are. Don't ask me to rationalize it. I mean, we could give answers, etc., that might be good in the moment. And then if a Holocaust would come, all those answers would go right out the window. And that's the point. They had the trial, they put God on trial, they found him logically guilty. And then they went to Daven Mincha. How? Why? How does it make logical sense? It's not logical. Stop trying to make it never. It was not logical all the way back. That's the point. It's not that it cannot be logical. It could also be, but it's not limited to logic. That's the point. It's not that it can't be natural, but it's not limited to nature. Being Jewish contains within it the element of the supernatural and the element of beyond logic. And Yishmael, I hate to break it to you, but you're entirely too logical, entirely too natural, entirely too normal. And in that way, you're just like any other human being. And every human being is expected to be righteous. That's why I am really bothered oftentimes when we make tikkun olam a Jewish thing. No, it's not. It's a human thing. To be righteous is not inherently Jewish. Everybody needs to be righteous. Not only does everybody need to be righteous, everybody needs to discover God and be devoted to him. And that has nothing to do with being Jewish. How do I know this? How do I know this? Because the first 75 years of Avram's amazing life, of his discovering God, devotion to God, self-sacrifice for righteousness, etc., 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 is omitted from the Torah. The Torah tells us nothing about Avram's first 75 years. And they're not because they are a particularly boring 75 years in which nothing amazing happened. No, Avram's first 75 years are probably the most amazing of anybody in history. We're talking about one who discovered God at the age of 3 on his own. Then decided that it's not enough to know this, he has to know as much about it as possible and to study it. And so he goes and he finds the Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever. Oh, by the way, before that, he defied his father, right? Who was the chief practitioner of idolatry of the kingdom. How do we know this? Because he was entrusted in creating the idols, right? Not just anybody can create art. It's not even that you give it to the nicest craftsman to do it. You give it to the person who is considered the holy man, right? Among you, the one who is most entrusted in the pagan rituals or whatever it is to be the one who actually make the gods, to design and create the gods. His father was the biggest. He was at the height of the hierarchy of the practitioners of these particular whatever pagan idols they serve. He was the right hand of Nimrod, the god king himself. And Avram defied his father and smashed all the idols, the whole story, the people coming in and whatever it is, and he was trying to teach his lessons. Then his father boots him out. He goes and finds the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever. Now here's the thing. Avram's even more remarkable than most people think. Why? Because anybody who tells you that Abraham was the only monotheist of his time is historically inaccurate. He was not the only monotheist of his time. In fact, the world's most famous person and most impactful person was a monotheist. And who was that?
The Pharaoh?
No. Noah was still alive when Abraham was a child.
And Noah was a
look
monotheist?
Noah was a monotheist. Noah was the one who spoke to God, built the ark, the whole thing. Noah, of course, believed only in the one God. The only difference is that Noah was not an evangelist. Noah was potentially the most influential person of that entire generation. Why? Simply because he was the grandpa of everybody alive. Everybody alive was his kin. There was nobody more potentially influential in that generation than Noah. And he was a devoted, righteous monotheist. So why in the world is it that the whole world was pagan? Because Noah decided it's not his business. Noah was wherever he was doing his thing quietly, which is why we say, right, about Noah that he was perfect in his generation. He still had that attitude. There's nothing to save. If my children go off, it's there. Whatever it is, I got to make sure I'm righteous. Got to take care of myself. And his son Shem, who was the father of a third of the world at that time, right, and the great 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 grandfather of Avram, right, and his grandson Aver opened a yeshiva to teach monotheism. But it was like Lahavdil, a Buddhist monastery on the top of the hill. Anybody who traveled all the way to them got to learn. But they didn't go out sharing this information. Avram went to study, and then he turned around and became the world's first Chabadnik. Right? Excuse me, are you a monotheist? You're not a monotheist.
I'll give you
come
some
into my
food.
mitzvah tank, and I will teach you about monotheism. Right? Right? And literally, this is who Avram was. And the Rambam says Avram was singularly successful, bringing tens of thousands over to the belief in the one God. Eventually leading to the great showdown with Nimrod, right? Nimrod didn't like this idea that Avram was going around teaching to serve one God that's not him. Then Avram goes into the fiery furnace, and this whole career of Avram and the miracles and the self-sacrifice, all that is not in the Torah. The Torah doesn't even give Avram the one line that it gives Noah. Noah also had a whole life before the Torah really starts to talk about his story with the building of the ark. At least by Noah it says Ish Sadik Tamim Haya B'Doratav. It gives a one-line bio. Avram doesn't even get that. Rather, the Torah says Vayomer Hashem El Avraham Lech Licha. Why does the Torah omit everything about Avram up until that point? The answer is because the Torah is making a point. We are not going to talk about Abraham, the great righteous man. We're going to talk about Abraham, the first Jew. And you know what made him the first Jew? Not his righteousness, not his intuition, not even his self-sacrifice. What made him the first Jew is because I chose him. Vayomer Hashem al Avraham Lech Licha. Boom, that's where his story begins. Because it's not, again, being a Jew is not tied to any achievement you have or haven't done, or any decision you have or haven't made. It is essential, existential, and instinctual. Which is why you could be very, very, very righteous, and you don't automatically graduate into Judaism.
But you can also be very unrighteous.
And that's where I was going. And
if
more
you were born
importantly,
to
you
Judaism,
could be very unrighteous. And a yid is a yid is a yid. That's the message from this week's parsha. What is
I feel
a Jew?
like that's a chiddush from the Rebbe.
It's not a chiddush. It's not a chiddush. There it is, black and white in the Torah. Go explain it otherwise. But it is something definitely that the Rebbe highlights in a way that it wasn't being done enough until the Rebbe taught this point. And it's not just a clarion call to go out and find a Jew and not write off Jews that are not righteous and are not devoted, and saying, "Oh, you're less of a Jew because of your lack of devotion. You're less of a Jew because of your lack of righteousness. You're less of a Jew because of your lack of commitment to Torah." It doesn't exist. A yid is a yid is a yid. But it also talks to us about who we are, and to clarify to us that our commitment and devotion to God is not based on whether our rationale or our logic. are that we sit there and we've measured and we've decided, we weighed the proposition, we decided it's better to be a Jew, not to be a Jew, or this. Again, it doesn't mean that, of course, it doesn't that it of course exists in that sphere as well. It doesn't. It's not non-existent in the sphere of rationale and logic and the natural order of things. But the point is, it's not limited to. It's not based on our logic. It's not based on our rationale. We are not committed to God because it makes sense to be. We are not committed to God because it's the right thing to do. We are not committed to God because it brings fulfillment and meaning to our lives. We are committed to God because that's the way it is. Finished. Why? Because I'm a Yid. There's the famous story about the Shvaler Zayda, that when eventually it was time for him to pass on, and he was lying on his deathbed, his family and his Hasidim surrounding him said, "Where do you want to be buried?" And he says, "Where?" So obviously you have your pick. The sections with great tzaddikim, the wisest people buried. He says, "I want to be buried next to Yasla Daganif." I say, "You want to be buried next to Yasla Daganif?" First of all, who? And I mean, it says there's
You mean
that.
which Ganef?
Yeah, but he
With
says,
Yasser.
yeah, which Yassel the Ganef right now, unfortunately. No,
Good
but
one, Paula.
no, but the thing was that uh, this was not some well-known individual. But then it said that some people knew about this tombstone, this weird tombstone in the cemetery, not in any particular position of honor or respect. And it said, "Here lies Yassel the Ganef. He was Yassel, he was a Ganef, but he was a Jew." That's what it said on his tombstone in Yiddish. It was Yassel, he was a Ganef, but he was a Jew. Okay.
It said Buddy was a Jew?
No. Or I don't know if it was Yassel, it was a Ganef. Yeah, maybe, but what's the story? And so the Shpal says, let me tell you the story. Story is that it turns out that even in the idyllic shtetl, right, that we always think that the shtetl was just populated with righteous, holy people. Now, it wasn't always righteous and holy. Not everybody was a good person, etc., etc. You had a child born to parents, and this kid was a troublemaker. Got himself into trouble, got himself thrown out of the cheder and whatever it was, and eventually started hanging with a bad crew. Now, non-Jews were ruffians, and these guys were Ganovim, and he became, known, infamous in the town, and his nickname became Yosel Laganov. People knew to stay away from him. He became shunned from the community, etc., etc. Was living a very ignominious type of life. One point or another, the group of thieves got together and were planning their biggest score that nobody dared think about. So, because everybody in these shtetls was poor, Jewish or not Jewish, and very few people had real money. The only place that had real money was the church, and there were silver platters and fixtures and statues and whatever it is. There was a lot of money in the church, but nobody would dare because the church had all the power to really, terrible consequence. But these guys felt brazen enough to make the attempt. Now, Yassel was what they called I forgot the expression, I think the key man or whatever it is, because he was the shortest, nimblest kind of guy, and he's the one who was going to get up there and go through a window on the top, and he was going to start throwing things out, and they were going to wrap it up and collect it. Sure enough, he goes like they do numerous jobs. He was the guy who went in, So he goes shimming up the wall of the church, breaks into the church, goes and starts throwing things out the window. Somebody had tipped off the municipality. They knew this was coming, and they were waiting until the guys were deep into their action, and they came and the rest of them got heard, the lead, whatever it is, the municipality coming, they hightailed it out of there. But Yassel, nobody took the time to call up to Yassel and tell him, get out. So he's sitting there and he's chucking out all the stuff. And by the time he finishes and he lowers himself down the rope, right into the hands of the what's it called, the bailiffs, whatever they call them. And they throw him into prison. It became a sensational trial because a Jew was caught breaking into the church. And this is punishable by death. And so they set the date of his execution. And here there's languishing in the prison, waiting for his execution. While there, he gets visited by the priest of the church. And the priest of the church turns to him and says, I'm offering you a way out, a way to spare your life. All you need to do is convert. Convert will not only save your body, it will save your soul, yada, yada, yada. And so here it is, offering you the way out. And Yassel looked at him and said, I'm Yassel. And I am a Ganef, but I'm a Jew.
In the church, they spoke Yiddish. They knew Ganef.
Or he said in Russian, whatever it is, but he said it in Polish, actually. And obviously, the priest left very dissatisfied, whatever it is. And then comes the day of the execution. And right there, right before the gallows, they turned to him again. Said, here's your chance. He looked the guy square in the eye and said, I'm Yassel. I am a Ganef, but I'm a Yid. Those were the last words he said. Before he returned his soul to his maker. This person, he was by definition not a righteous person. It wasn't his righteousness that came calling at the last minute.
It was his Jewish status. But the thing is, if he had agreed to convert, he would have also been a Jew.
Yes, but that essential Yiddishkeit wouldn't allow him to do that, even that.
Right.
And as the story is many a story, but the point of the matter is that it's not necessarily based on a rationale. It's not based on a righteousness. It just is, which is what Yassel was saying. It just is. You're asking me to deny my very existence, which is what Rabbi Akiva told the Roman who said, just convert, right? Just abandon the Torah and you won't be persecuted, you won't be targeted, you'll live like good Romans, like every other nation that we've conquered. And Rabbi Akiva turned to him and says, it's like a fox telling the fish who are running away from the nets, stop being a fish and join us on dry land. When we step out of the water, we're dead. That's it. Because that's who we are. We're Am Yisrael, and it is beyond our rationales, beyond our logic, is beyond, and that's why we are correct, and we all feel the essential correctness in not giving our child a choice. But at 8 days old, giving them the bris.
The thing is, though, I think, despite the story about Terach as the idol maker, I think when his son rebelled against that, the father supported him.
You're saying when Terach and Avram?
Yeah.
Well, it's not so simple. I mean, there's a lot of midrashim on it. In other words, Terach eventually, the story seems to go that it took Terach a long time to turn around, right? To come around to Avram's position. Did he eventually? Those that say that that's what the Torah hints out to when it says that Terach had to take his family out of Ur Kasdim. That he eventually did.
That and the fact that Terach didn't force Abraham into his way of life.
Oh, it could be he tried. It could be he tried, and again, according to the Medrash, the fact that he had to run away from his father to go study in the Shiva Shem, when he destroyed all the idols, he left home. Why? Not because Tara said, "Oh, you destroyed all my idols. Come, son, let's have a eggs, sunny side up omelet and schmooze about it." Um, Tarach, and that's my point. And definitely in the beginning, Tarach was quite. Tarach is the one who told on him to Nimrod. That is for sure. The understanding, though, is that after Avram was the performance, whatever it is, Terach joined him and was therefore exiled alongside of him from or caused him or whatever or left with prejudice. He was not honorably discharged from Nimrod's service. Having said that, either way, it still doesn't change. Not still doesn't change. But what, Paula? What are you? Where are you going with this?
It's an idea that I've actually been tossing around with Rabbi Beeler this week, that when you're very young, if you don't, and you are what seems to be an iconoclast, except what you're doing is right, and what you're feeling is right, and what you are believing is right. If you are now isolated by your young community of peers, and you don't have support from your parents, your life isn't just going to be lonely, it's going to be almost impossible and perhaps detrimental to your mental health.
Sure.
Without that, I'm not saying much more than that.
No, but Paula, all that was left out of the Torah because that's neither here nor there. In other words, that doesn't have to be the story of the Jew, and it doesn't have to not be the story of the Jew. That's my whole point. That the Torah elects to leave all that out because that doesn't say anything as to whether you're a Jew or not. You could live a life ensconced in a beautiful community with great people helping you, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that's a very Jewish life. Or you can live in Georgia alone, or whatever it is, and then discover that you're Jewish and leave home to go learn it, and it's good, and that could be a Jewish life. The point is, neither of those options define what it means to be a Yid. A Yid doesn't mean you have to live a life of suffering and you can't be ensconced beautifully in a community.
The story of Abraham is all about continuity.
But the story of Avram doesn't begin with his escapades of, and the Torah doesn't tell us that. And in terms of the continuity, sometimes not. The fact is, Avram's story has a lot of both, a lot of standing alone and a lot of standing together. And that's also the role of the Jewish people. On the one hand, Hein Am Levadad Yishkon, right? And then on the other hand, Mamlechet Kohanim. You need to be a nation of teachers and influencers, et cetera, et cetera. And but in this thing, that's the point. Does a Jew need a community? Of course they do. Hence minyan. Hence the idea that you have to go live with, et cetera. Also, does it say in the Torah that if the community around you is evil, whatever it is it the Jewish thing to go leave that community and maintain your integrity? Yes, also. The Torah doesn't need you to either be fully enveloped and integrated with every other person around you or to stand alone. It really is, neither of those speaks to what it means to be essentially a Jew. You don't have to have a story of journeying alone, and you don't have to the story of being for the center of your whole community. You could be a Jew that is surrounded by everybody. You can be a Jew that doesn't. You could be a Jew that enjoys Sephardic food and Ashkenazi food. What I'm saying is, all these things are elements of that once you are a Jew, there's a certain standard in the way you must live, and there's certain things that come with that. But what is the foundation? What is the platform upon which all this is built? Is it righteousness? Is it integrity? Is it devotion? Is it standing alone? Is it standing together? No, 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 no. It just is. Hashem chose you. Chosen nation. That's what it means. It doesn't mean chosen for righteousness. It doesn't mean chosen for glory. It doesn't mean chosen for persecution. It means chosen. Finished. Now, once you are chosen, what do you do about it? What do you got to do about it? Why did Hashem choose you? Because he chose you. Why did Hashem choose you? Because he chose you. Now that he chose you, now there's things you got to do about it. But that's his point. His point is, Avram says, but isn't Yishmael righteous enough? To which Hashem says, yeah, he's plenty righteous. It's not that it's not denigrating Yishmael's righteousness. The problem is that he's entirely too regular. That's a problem. It needs to be one of those that I've chosen. Yitzchak has to be that sense that I've chosen him and that he's committed to me way before it made sense. Way before there's a reason. Way before there's rationale and logic to it. It's something that is more essential and more integral.
So then the answer isn't because it just is that you're chosen. It's because you've made a commitment.
That's why I said
So I'm not getting the difference.
Yeah, but you don't make it at 8 days.
You don't make the commitment. That's exactly it. By the time your logic comes online, it's already is.
I see. Okay.
Because that's the point. It doesn't begin and end with your commitment. As far as you're concerned, it just is.
Okay.
And that's very key and important. Because there's going to be time when your commitment will fail you, and it still will be. There's somebody who will be screaming from the rooftops, I'm not committed! I am not committed! And the Chabadnik is still going to be rolling up his sleeve and say, come, put on top. But I'm not committed! I'm not. Right? Somebody who's born to a Christian family and says, I'm not Christian, guess what?
They're not
Christian. They're not. Somebody is born to a Jewish family and says, I'm not Jewish.
Tough luck.
Yeah, but you are. No, I'm not. I don't believe in God. I don't believe this. I don't like cholent. I don't like gefilte fish. I'm not Jewish. Yeah, but you are. In fact, you're just as Jewish as Moshe. Can you imagine somebody saying, I'm not Christian? Oh yeah, you're just as Christian as the Pope. Oh no, he's not. No, he's not.
No. You have to make a decision to be saved and all kinds of other chazarai.
Judaism is not a religion. It's not.
It's a status.
It's not. It's more than a status. A status can be changed.
It's an immutable status.
It's a reality. It's what it is.
It just is.
It just is. And Yishmael couldn't get. That's the point. For Yishmael, it wouldn't be just is. It would be something that, for example, that if at that point it was the ability to convert into, he would have converted into it. And at that point, it said, I can't have it can't start with the one converting into it, because then it would always be the ability to convert out of it. It needs to start with the one who just is. That's the foundation. After which we can allow for people to convert in. But it's got to begin with the one who just is. And that's the point. And that is why we deliberately do. We don't really do anything like that. Things that will affect a child's life forever. Decisions, in other words, that will affect a child's life forever. We never do it at the age of 8. Right? We won't, let's say, enshrine them in the doctor's guild at the age of 8 days old. Maybe he doesn't want to be a doctor. Right? but yet at 8 days old, we're willing to commit him to this? The answer is because he's not being committed to it now. He always was. This is just makes the point he is. This is just being true to what he is. He is. And again, it's a very edele thing. It's a very kind of refined, ephemeral idea. But that's the way it is. These parshas are laid the foundation. These are the big. These parshas are. This is it. This parsha talks about that. What it is to be a yid, and what is it to be a yid? As they say in Hebrew, kacha,
Kacha.
kacha, kacha. Because we come in all shapes and sizes, levels of commitment, backgrounds, histories, etc., etc. Good people, bad people, worst people, the greatest people. A yid is a yid is a yid. And
It
that
seems like
starts.
that would make it much, that understanding makes it much easier to be who you are, meaning what you do and what your outlook is on all
Let's put
Jews.
it the other way. It's a chicken or the egg thing. It's not. It's not makes it easier for me. It's why I am. It's why this is the doctrine that had the Rebbe recruit towards this cause.
I'm sorry I didn't say it that way. You're always more articulate than I am. That's
No,
exactly
no,
what I meant.
yes, that's why this was a talk from the very first years of the Rebbe, and he was clarifying. He was clarifying why he was going to take all his Hasidim and turn them into activists to reach as many Jews as possible, because he says a Yid is a Yid is a Yid, and there isn't a better Jew or a worse Jew, etc., etc. And if that's the case, then it's our responsibility to let them know. Otherwise, how unfortunate is it? You're not making them a yid, because at that point the person would say, "I don't want to be made a yid. Go leave them alone. Why are you harassing somebody?" But what happens if you're out there being a lamplighter, just showing them the truth of what is? Here's who you are, whether I like it or not. Before I came and after I leave, this is who you are. But wouldn't you like to know? If you knew about a prince or whatever, or somebody who has something, right? Or somebody won the lottery or whatever it is, somebody has some truly great, and you know they're walking around clues. Would you say, I'm not going to mind their business. I'm not going to butt in and I'm not going to sit there and nudge them? No, you should know. You should know this, especially if that information about them that they don't know is that they are my brother or sister.
I think that's one great paradigm. I tried it and I failed miserably. And I came to the conclusion that for me, leading by activism, which is what you do so magnificently, is one way to go, but leading by example is another way to go.
That's
And
true.
so in
Without a doubt, Paula. But by the way, the first thing is not a reason or an excuse. I guarantee you, I have failed so many more times than you have, in such a spectacular, miserable way. Says I can't tell you how many people I have royally pissed off. Uh, my son Nahum, just now for Sukkot, ran on the trail to help somebody shake a little of us who could look very Jewish. And in his zeal, he ran right in front of the guy's bike. The guy did a sharp brake and flew right over his handlebars and did himself some serious damage. And he cursed out my son. What a start to my son's career.
That's a good lesson.
and I'm not allowed to hug this kid.
So,
Aw.
oh, sure, you can hug Nachum. I'll tell you, it happened to be, it's interesting because I was, they were each they literally left the Yontif meal early to go run and do this. It was a beautiful thing to
You
see
want to
that.
turn off the recording?
No, no, I'm happy
Okay.
to have this play on the recording. And he ran to go. What's it called? They all ran, all of them, and so they were placed in different places along the, along the Crescent Trail, and some in front of the Giant, and other, wherever it was. People would congregate where they could harass them. And I was kind of walking in between, making sure everybody's okay and fine. And I actually came up to this group right after this happened because I see they're all a little kind of shell shocked. And I said, "What happened?" And so they explained it's intimidating. It's whatever it is to get yelled. First of all, to be the cause of something like that happening, but then to also be really emotionally yelled at, like this guy was apparently quite. Because one of my sons filled me in, and in the rated R rant that this fellow
Wow.
went on. Decidedly, I mean, I totally, understand this guy. Took a dive onto the concrete. It's not. I can imagine he was more than slightly miffed about what had happened. But what I'm saying is failure, and even if you are the politest, nicest, most well-meaning, and you're not causing something to go over the handlebars, I could tell you stories about things that I've heard and whatever it is, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's the thing. Again, kind of going back to it. It's not about logic or rationale, whether good or bad, whatever it is. It is. It is. It is. Now, but your second point is also correct, which is not always does it have to be activism. It could be leading by example, and in that way you can have. And for example, I think that more than half of our greatest success is the leading by example and not the activism. Sometimes just walking down the street with all the kids, on Shabbos or whatever it is, and then seeing this, or just seeing how the kids interact with each other, or seeing how we interact with the kids, whatever it is, or just seeing how we live our lives. That itself, there's no doubt about it. There's netzach, which is to persevere and get into people's faces, and there's hod, which is to be, glorious and standing off and let people see for themselves. So there's not one way to do this, but all comes down to the idea that we don't write off a single person as not being having devolved from their Judaism. That doesn't exist. And number two, and therefore that has moved out of our sphere of general empathy. And not, of course, we have empathy for all living creatures, et cetera, but a special, obviously, a sense of responsibility and connectiveness to our fellow Jew. That applies to every single one because a yid is a yid is a yid. Why? Kaha. And that's the message. All right, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi, can I say thank you for being nice to my friends who came to Bethesda for a family reunion?
Remind me.
Okay, so
I'm just
I have
nice to way too
friends
many
here.
people. So
I have friends here, Racheli and Joey, and he was in Bethesda for a weekend. He couldn't even pronounce it. He said, "We're going to this place. Do you know any place I can go pray?" So I said, "Do I know a place in Bethesda?"
yes,
So
yes.
he came. Well, he went with his father.
Father.
They're
Yeah.
kind of like African American looking, like very light
Yes.
African American. Yeah.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and yeah, they were just raving. They were so happy. They went back the next day to take a picture after Shabbat, to take a picture in front of the Chabad, your Chabad, to show me.
Yes, yes. We saw them the last days of the Chag. That's it. Yeah.
Yes, during Sukkot. Yeah, they were so happy. They were just so happy.
Baruch
So
Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
yeah, there's that. But also I wanted to tell you that just by coincidence, Paula and I, is she still there? Did she go away?
Yes, she said.
Paula and I had a text conversation about praying for certain things to happen. And I said, I'm praying for something me'ala teva, That's what I do. And so she didn't know what that was, and we were talking about it.
No, I knew what it was. I didn't think that was a miracle.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't think what happened was a miracle.
Right. I just said, that's how you pray for a miracle, something me'ala teva.
Right. So there we go. Now you know it's a local call.
It's true. Remember that I went to that lecture by Pinchas Taylor about whether or not Jews believe in karma. And he said, Jews believe, that you get neged, what's it called? Midah, midah or something. But we don't
Megid
believe in
midah.
karma because we know the manager.
Right.
We've got
Just so you know, I have to defend myself one more time. The
Yeah.
conversation that the two of us had
Right.
started off by my saying to Jerry, I've been doing an awful lot of praying for this
praying.
outcome.
Absolutely.
I just don't
didn't
think it
say
was
you
a
were-
miracle.
Right. Yeah.
I think I know what outcome you are referring to. And
I think we did
and
well. I think we did well.
Yes, we did. First of all, we also did well by not talking about it, which is important. It's important that yes, etc. That what happened, and we feel strongly about it, and then we can remember that as we say, yeah, carry on, yalla, and let's continue doing the things that are
Right.
on what on our things that are on our agenda and responsibility to do. All right, guys, I'm gonna go. Wish
Thank
you all a
you,
good
Rabbi.
Shabbos.
Shabbat
Good
shalom.
Shabbos. Hopefully see you on
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
All right, wonderful. All right.
So